Ted Cruz, U.S. Senator. Welcome to the John and Ken Show.
Ken, great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
And I also have Libby Dankman alongside me here. Ted,
Hi, Libby.
Are you enjoying California?
I am. You guys really do live in paradise, and it's just a beautiful slice of the world.
All right, let me get this out of the way. Your response to our listeners about the National Enquirer story and the mistresses.
Oh, look, it is a complete lie. It is totally false. It's tabloid trash that was pushed by Donald Trump and his henchmen, and it really is a sign of how desperate they are that they're spreading lies that are completely false.
Have you considered suing?
You know, the problem with filing a lawsuit is it just keeps the garbage in the headlines over and over and over again. It's what the Trump folks want, is a lawsuit to drag it on. It's a total lie, but my focus is on the actual issues people care about, which is bringing jobs back to this country, which is defending our freedom, and keeping us safe and secure from the threats to America, especially radical Islamic terrorism.
All right, we're going to get to all those in a moment because you're hitting on the top issues I think that our listeners have. But let me ask you, because we were just talking about this before you came on, the delegate math, based on the Associated Press numbers, you're going to have to win 82% of the remaining delegates to win on the first ballot in Cleveland. So what is the plan here?
Well, we have a straightforward path to winning 1237. You're right, we need about 80% of the delegates. That's a high threshold. But it's not nearly as high as it sounds, because most of the states that are coming forward are either winner take all or winner take most, which means if we beat Donald Trump consistently, we will end up taking north of 80% of the delegates. So, for example, a week ago in Utah, we beat Donald Trump actually with a big margin in Utah. We got 100% of the delegates there. Wisconsin is going to vote on Tuesday. The last two polls in Wisconsin have shown us 10 points up. If we win Wisconsin by that kind of margin, in all likelihood, we will get all 42 of their delegates. And so, given the way delegates are allocated, winning 80% of the remaining delegates is something that we can do. Now, it takes us winning. It is not an easy path, but it is a path directly in front of us. But, Ken, the second option, if we don't get to 1237, it's entirely possible we go to a convention, it is contested, and nobody has 1237, that we come in with a ton of delegates, that Trump comes in with a ton of delegates, and if that happens, I think we're in a very, very strong position to earn a majority of the delegates at the convention. And I'll tell you, California's 172 delegates are going to be absolutely critical. California could be in the deciding position in this election, and we are working hard to compete for the support of the men and women in this great state.
Yeah.
And Senator,
if
you go to that contested convention, what is your elevator pitch to the free agent delegates? What do you want to say to them? If you could speak directly to those delegates that could make all the difference in that first round, what's your quick pitch to support you instead of Mr. Trump?
Well, you know, if you look nationwide, about 65 to 70% of Republicans recognize that nominating Donald Trump would be a train wreck. That Donald loses to Hillary, and he loses badly. He loses by double digits. If Donald Trump is our nominee, Hillary Clinton is the president, we lose the Supreme Court for a generation, we lose the Bill of Rights, our kids are buried in trillions of debt, and stay trapped in the economic stagnation we've had the last 7 years. I beat Hillary Clinton, and that is a sharp difference. You know, just last week, there was a general election poll in the state of Utah. Donald Trump is losing Utah to Hillary Clinton. Now, Utah may be the reddest, most conservative state in the country. If the Republican can't carry Utah, you are looking at a bloodbath of epic proportions. It's like a Walter Mondale loss. And so one of the reasons why so many Republicans are unifying behind our campaign here in California and nationwide is the stakes are too high for us to lose, for us to hand the general election to Hillary on a silver platter. And then secondly, substantively, I think Republican primary voters want to get behind a campaign that has a positive, optimistic, hopeful, conservative message that focuses on jobs and economic growth, on reducing the burdens of the federal government on small businesses, on raising wages, on protecting America. That's what my record has been, and that's what I'll do as president.
When you considered running for president, did you ever imagine a race like this with a character like Donald Trump in it?
Not remotely. This has been an unprecedented race. A year ago, I think we envisioned when we launched the campaign that at this stage we would be in a battle between me and a more typically moderate establishment candidate. And I think we believed at the time we would do very well in that head-to-head battle. Donald Trump has scattered all the rules. But at this point, we're in a head-to-head match. There are only two candidates who have any plausible path to winning the nomination, to getting a majority of the delegates. The nominee is either going to be Donald Trump or me.
Well, he started with Jeb Bush, right? He made fun of Jeb Bush for being boring. He moved on to Marco Rubio for being little Marco. Now you're Lion Ted. You're right in the crosshairs of Donald Trump. How does that feel?
Well, listen, Donald is pathological. Donald cannot discuss the issues of the substance. Donald prefers to communicate 140 characters or less. So he doesn't have any substance. When it comes to bringing jobs back to America, Donald has no idea how to do that. He simply yells, "We're going to start winning. We're going to start winning," as if he could wave a magic wand in the air. When it comes to keeping America safe, he has no idea how to do that. His proposals, just a week ago, he proposed America effectively withdrawing from NATO and abandoning Europe, which would hand a massive victory to Putin and a massive victory to ISIS. And so Donald's response, because he doesn't have substantive solutions, is he engages in insults and attacks and personal attacks. He gets very personal and direct. He's gone after my wife. He's gone after my family. And I'll tell you, Ken, I don't respond in kind. I think our children should be out of bounds. It is completely inappropriate. And I think the men and women of California are not interested in a candidate behaving like a 5-year-old, tossing insults and attacks. They want real and positive issues-based solutions. That's what my campaign is based on.
Well, yeah, but Trump likes to say you started it, so he'll talk about what happened in Iowa with Ben Carson's votes, and then he'll talk about the picture of Melania that got circulated by a super PAC supporting you.
But what he's saying is flat out false, and he knows it's false. The Melania super PAC, that PAC has nothing to do with me. I don't know the person. I've never had a communication with that person. Indeed, the person running that PAC has attacked me a bunch of times. And Donald used the fact that there was some PAC that didn't like him as an excuse to deliberately target my wife, to go after Heidi Cruz, to attack her directly, to ridicule her, to insult her. Frankly, it was disgusting. And this was Donald Trump himself doing this. This was not somebody else. And there's a reason for that. We haven't had a debate in a month.
Yeah.
Because Donald runs away from debates. He's afraid to debate because he can't defend. He doesn't know the very basics of how to fix the problems in this country. And so he prefers just to sit there on Twitter late at night, insulting and attacking. And these are serious times, Ken. We need someone who understands the problems facing America and has a real and positive solution to bring back jobs. That's what I'm campaigning.
Well, all right, here's where we're going to get on the issues. And there are three things pretty important to our audience, and you touched on them before. Yep. Illegal immigration, jobs, and terrorism. Let me start with illegal immigration. One of the reasons that Trump has cut through, Ted, is because he says things like, we're going to build a wall, we're going to deport people. I know you're anti-amnesty, but I don't know a lot more about you on this issue. And I know you're from Texas, where you face the same problems we do with illegal immigration here in California. What is your plan in detail on illegal immigration?
Well, I have by far the most serious and aggressive, detailed plan to stop illegal immigration. If you go to our website, it's tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. There's an 11-page, single-spaced plan, chapter and verse, specifying exactly how we're going to stop illegal immigration. We're going to build a wall. We're going to triple the Border Patrol. We're going to increase fourfold the fixed-wing and rotary-wing aircraft that monitor the border. We're going to put in place a strong E-Verify system at the workplace, so you cannot get a job without proving you're here legally. We're going to put in place a biometric exit-entry system, so that people who come on visas, 40% of illegal immigration is not crossing the border illegally.
Right,
it's coming on a visa and never leaving. We're going to end sanctuary cities, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to cut off all federal tax dollars to sanctuary cities, and we're going to end welfare benefits to those here illegally. And the effect of that will stop illegal immigration and solve the problem. And, I'll mention to you, Ken, Donald talks a lot about illegal immigration, and he uses a lot of angry rhetoric. but his record on illegal immigration is a disaster. You know, in 2013, when I was leading the fight against the Gang of Eight amnesty plan, Donald Trump was funding the Gang of Eight. 5 of the 8 members of the Gang of Eight, he gave $50,000 to. He supported open border Democrats for 40 years. Donald Trump in January told the New York Times editorial board, "Don't believe anything I said on immigration. I'm not going to build a wall. I'm not going to deport anybody. That's just rhetoric that I'm using to get votes." He's telling us he's lying to us. Now, the New York Times has a tape of that conversation. They've said they'll release it, but Donald won't let them release it.
Yeah,
if you want to...
Go ahead. Well, he's always said, as a businessman, he likes to spread himself on all sides of the issue, and that's why he gave to those politicians you referred to. But now as a candidate, he's more serious about this, and he's going to really, because he jumped out at people the first day when he made his statement about illegal immigrants coming over the border, and most of the media gasped. But you can see now, people that are voting for him saw something different in him from that.
Listen, I understand the people that are voting for Donald. We're angry. We're angry at politicians who keep lying to us, who make promises and then do the exact opposite of what they do. And Donald is a loud, angry, screaming, cursing voice that feels like a vessel for that anger. I get that. But if you're angry and frustrated at the corruption of Washington, it doesn't make sense to support Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has been enmeshed in that Washington corruption for 40 years. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, they're flip sides of the same coin. Hillary Clinton has made millions of dollars selling government power and influence. Donald Trump has made billions of dollars buying government power and influence. They're both the system. They both support big government and big business and the corruption that has gotten us in this mess. And if you want someone who'll stand up to that, you should look to who has an actual record of standing up to Washington, of taking on not just Democrats, but leaders in our own party. And that's what I've been doing over and over again. It's why we're seeing conservatives uniting behind our campaign. It's why we're seeing Republicans uniting behind our campaign, because we need a president who stands with the working men and women of this country against the bipartisan corruption of Washington.
Well, you said you were going to build a wall. How come you're not in the news for that? Donald Trump's always talking about the wall. I didn't realize you had a wall in your plan, too.
I talk about a wall every day, but the reason is simple. The mainstream media wants Donald Trump to be the nominee. They've given him $2 billion of free advertising, and this is not because they're kind and generous. It's because the network executives are all liberal Democrats. They are ready for Hillary. They recognize that Donald Trump is the only person on earth Hillary Clinton can beat in a general election. So they want us to nominate Donald Trump so then Hillary can be president. And
well, don't you think it's about but they're getting good numbers from Donald Trump's appearing on the network too. Look at the debates. I think Trump's right. I think he did jack up the numbers for those debates just by his presence.
Look, there's no doubt that Donald Trump is the Kim Kardashian presidential candidate. He sits on Twitter and makes a lot of noise, but he has no solutions to fixing the problem. And let's take immigration again. You know, Donald Trump had a $1 million court judgment against him for hiring illegal aliens. Now, Donald's defense of that, he said, oh, that was a long time ago. Okay, fine. Right now, today, Donald's hotel in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, is bringing hundreds of foreign workers. And his explanation, he says, you cannot find Americans who are qualified and willing to work as waiters and waitresses. Now, Ken, you know that's utter nonsense. Millions of Americans have worked as waiters and waitresses. My dad, when he came from Cuba as an immigrant 58 years ago, washed dishes making 50 cents an hour. But the reason that Donald brings in foreign workers is he can pay them a lot less, and they can't quit. They're captive. And listen, in that, Donald is not unique. Lots of big businesses do that, but you don't get to do as Donald Trump has done, which is abuse the immigration laws, abuse American workers, and then suddenly pretend to be a champion of American workers.
All right, another issue.
Someone who will fight for the workers.
All right, well, speaking of that, another issue that he's really resonating with people in is jobs, and his idea about all these horrible free trade agreements and the fact that America's lost so many jobs. We've made bad deals with countries like China and Mexico. What's your stance on that?
Absolutely. He is right that we have made bad trade deals, and we need a president who will fight for us. But Donald has no solution to this. If you ask him, how do we bring jobs back to America, He has no answer because his solution is always focused on Washington. I'll tell you where jobs come from. Jobs come from small businesses. 2/3 of all new jobs come from small businesses. If you want to see the economy take off, you lift the boot of the federal government off the back of the necks of small businesses. If I'm elected president, Ken, we will repeal every word of Obamacare. We'll pass common sense health care reform that makes health insurance personal and portable and affordable and keeps government from getting in between us and our doctors. We will pass a simple flat tax where every American can fill out their taxes on a postcard, and we will abolish the IRS. We'll rein in the EPA and the federal regulators that are hammering small businesses, and we will end amnesty, stop illegal immigration, and end sanctuary cities. And the effect of all of that is we will see millions and millions of new high-paying jobs. We'll see jobs coming back from Mexico, coming back from China. We'll see wages rising all over this country, and we'll see young people coming out of school with 2, 3, 4, 5 job opportunities. That is a real economic agenda. It's something Donald doesn't have, and it's one of the reasons why so many Republicans are coming together behind our campaign.
Well, when I think about jobs and I think about the appeal of Trump, and he's even made a joke about it, it is the less educated. These are people that have to work sort of in manufacturing jobs and other lower-end service jobs. I mean, what are you going to do to bring those people back into the workforce? That's who they like Trump right now for that.
Well, if you look, Ken, among the blue-collar workers, the manufacturing workers, Donald and I are dividing them. In some states, he's winning them. In other states, I'm winning them. Wisconsin is a very heavy manufacturing state. Wisconsin's voting on Tuesday. Right now, the polling shows me with a 10-point lead in Wisconsin. And if you ask Donald, he has no answers or substance. He just yells a lot. And I'll use an example. If your car is broke down, do you want your next-door neighbor to come stand in the driveway and yell and scream and curse at the car? Or do you actually want someone to lift the hood and fix the engine? Donald doesn't know how to fix it. So his solution for jobs going overseas is he says he wants to put in place a 45% tariff on foreign goods. Now, a tariff is a tax. So if Donald does that, he's putting a 45% tax on you on everything you buy on the store. You go to the store and you buy diapers, you buy clothes, you buy a new car. The price just increased 45% under the Donald Trump tax. People are hurting now. That would be devastating. And the response to that immediately triggers reciprocal tariffs, which means suddenly our exports plummet and farmers and ranchers and manufacturers see their sales drop through the floor. A much better solution is my tax plan, and you can read all the details of the tax plan on our website, tedcruz.org, is a simple flat tax, and it is what's called border adjustable, which means all exports are tax-free. If you're exporting, you don't pay any tax. If you're a farmer, if you're a rancher, if you're a manufacturer, exports are completely tax-free. And all imports pay the business flat tax. Now, what that does is it brings millions of jobs back to America, and it doesn't trigger reciprocal tariffs. It's a much better option to get the job done. And we need a president who understands these issues and can actually fix them rather than just yell and scream about them.
Without the IRS, who's collecting your flat tax?
Well, the flat tax is designed. You can actually see the postcard that you would fill out. It's on our website, the real postcard. The existing IRS, there are roughly 90,000 employees. They're devoted to enforcing the massive tax code, almost all of which goes away under the flat tax. The existing IRS is corrupt, it is politicized, it is partisan, and we need to shut it down entirely. Now, there would still be a small office in the Treasury Department that receives the postcards and collects the taxes, but getting rid of the tax code means that the entity we know as the IRS would cease to exist, and it would be a fundamentally different function.
All right, let's move on to terrorism. As you know, we had a horrible attack in San Bernardino last December by a crazy couple who apparently did it in the name of ISIS. And, of course, Brussels and Paris and everything else that's gone on. And you've been in the news for this idea of patrols in Muslim neighborhoods. Have you backed off from that stance? And what is your more detailed plan for people who are frightened about domestic terrorism?
Right. Not remotely. And we are facing grave threats to this country, and we need a real leader who will do whatever is necessary to keep America safe. You know, the pattern we've seen now over and over again is when we have a terrorist attack, whether it is in Paris, whether it's in Brussels, or whether it was tragically in San Bernardino that we saw right here in California, President Obama goes on national television. He refuses to even utter the words radical Islamic terrorism. And instead, he lectures Americans on Islamophobia. Well, enough is enough. We need a president who's not bound up with political correctness, but is willing to name the enemy, to confront it, and to do what is needed to defeat it.
Do you think this political correctness, though, will leave us open to more attacks? Is that what you're saying? Because he doesn't call it radical Islamism?
Of course it does. Let's take, for example, the terrorist who committed the San Bernardino attack. One of those two terrorists, the female terrorist, had posted public calls, had used social media to call for jihad. And yet the Obama administration refused to look to social media, refused to examine it because it wasn't politically correct. Not only that, she put down on her application, her visa application, a fake address in Pakistan. And yet the vetting didn't find out that it was a fake and made-up address, that she should never have been admitted to this country. And President Obama, because he won't identify the enemy as radical Islamic terrorism, he and Hillary Clinton still propose bringing tens of thousands of Syrian Muslim refugees to America, even though ISIS has told us they want to infiltrate those refugees and use them to wage jihad and murder innocent Americans, even though the FBI tells us they can't vet those refugees to make sure they're not terrorists. Because of political correctness, Obama and Hillary still want to do that. That makes no sense. And I'll tell you, Ken, as Commander-in-Chief, my number one priority will be keeping America safe. When it comes to radical Islamic terrorism, we will defeat radical Islamic terrorism. And with ISIS, we're not going to weaken them. We're not going to degrade them. We are going to utterly and completely destroy them. We need a Commander-in-Chief focused on defeating our enemies, not saying what is popular in the mainstream media and in the halls of the liberal academy.
Yeah, I heard you mention during the town hall the other night the horrible attack at Fort Hood in Texas, and that's a great example of the political correctness. I mean, to call that workplace violence, as they did, that horrible attack carried out by Nidal Hasan, was a great example of what you're talking about.
It's exactly right. And, you know, the Obama administration had enough information. They should have prevented that attack. Nidal Hasan, the Obama administration knew he had been in contact with Anwar al-Awlaki, a known radical Islamic cleric. They knew that Hasan had asked al-Awlaki about the permissibility of waging jihad against his fellow soldiers. Now, you and I both know what should have happened when that happened. If you find out that someone in the military is talking to a radical cleric about waging jihad, within minutes they ought to be in handcuffs. But political correctness meant they didn't do anything, and Nidal Hasan walked through murdering 14 innocent souls, including an unborn child. That's an example. When you don't identify the enemy, you don't put in place policies to defeat the enemy. That's going to change if I'm elected president.
Do you believe that there are radical terrorist cells within the United States who could be plotting things and we're not doing enough to prevent it?
Absolutely. Of course there are. ISIS has made clear their intention to wage jihad. This administration doesn't monitor it, doesn't focus on it. It pretends like these are random, unconnected acts of violence. I'll give you another example. The Boston bombing at the Boston Marathon. We knew that the Tsarnaev brothers were both connected with radical Islamic terrorism. Russia told us that. The FBI went and interviewed them. And then they dropped the ball. They just stopped monitoring them. Well, the elder Tsarnaev brother actually posted on YouTube a public call to jihad, but the FBI didn't notice because they weren't paying attention to him anymore, and then tragically carried out the bombing. We should have stopped that. If the federal government were focused on the enemy, if we identified the enemy as radical Islamic terrorism and devoted law enforcement and national security and overseas our military to defeating it, we could have prevented the Boston Marathon bombing. We could have prevented the San Bernardino female terrorist from coming to America. We could have prevented Nidal Hasan from murdering 14 innocent souls at Fort Hood. That's what a positive, proactive commander-in-chief focused on defending America would be doing.
Yeah, instead of an all-out Muslim ban, you're just asking for a little tougher stance on just seeing what's going on in this country.
Well, and I've also introduced legislation that would suspend for 3 years refugees from countries where ISIS or Al-Qaeda control significant territory. Now, that's actually a problem directed at the threat, rather than what Donald does is he just sort of yells and screams and insults people, but he doesn't have substantive policy solutions to keeping us safe. We need real solutions, not simply empty rhetoric.
All right, Libby has a question for you.
Senator, gay marriage is the law of the land. The Supreme Court has settled that, kind of setting aside how we feel about that issue. What do you think about states like North Carolina, and now Mississippi is on the verge of passing a similar law, passing legislation that allows businesses to deny services to gay people or requires transgender people to go to the bathroom of the gender that they were born with? Do you think that the uproar over this and businesses threatening to not do business with those states anymore is causing a rift where we're going to have a region of the country that appears to be unwelcoming to a certain set of people, gay people, transgender people, moving forward? Is that bad for the country?
Well, I'll tell you, Libby, I'm a constitutionalist. I have spent my entire adult life fighting to defend the Constitution, fighting to defend the Bill of Rights. I've argued 9 times in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, and when it comes to defending the Constitution, that is a deep passion. Under the Constitution, marriage is a question for the states. If someone wants to change the marriage laws of their state, they should do so in the state legislature rather than having 5 unelected judges deciding contested public policy issues for the whole country. When it comes to North Carolina, when it comes to other states, Georgia acting to protect religious liberty, religious liberty is the very first liberty protected in the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights. And it used to be, 20 years ago, religious liberty was a bipartisan commitment. It used to be that Democrats and Republicans, we might fight over marginal tax rates and how high taxes should be. But when it came to protecting religious liberty, we all stood together in a bipartisan manner. If you look at the Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act, it passed the United States Senate virtually unanimously. It was signed into law by a Democrat, Bill Clinton. Legislation virtually identical to that now at the state levels. The Democratic Party is opposing because they have gotten so extreme that they're not willing to protect religious liberty if it conflicts with their partisan ideology. In my view, it is the fundamental right of every American to practice your faith, to worship God, and to live according to your faith and conscience without government getting in the way. And we need to practice a little bit of tolerance and diversity, protecting people's religious liberty. And so I will always protect religious liberty, and I will end the Obama administration's unrelenting attack on religious liberty of American citizens.
What I'm hearing you saying, Senator, do you think that it would be okay for a state like Mississippi or North Carolina to say that they won't issue marriage licenses to gay people who want to get married? Is there a right that people have to marry who they want to marry in this country that can't be abridged by a state law?
Under the Constitution, marriage is a question for the states. That has been the case for over 200 years. And if someone wants to change the marriage laws in a state, the proper way to do it is to do it at the state level. It's not, our Constitution doesn't give 5 unelected judges the power to decide every controversial social issue. And I'm a big believer in federalism, the 10th Amendment, and in democracy. And I think if you want to change public policy, you should convince your fellow citizens, not rely, as liberal Democrats have done, on the courts to just impose your policy views on 330 million Americans.
But as U.S. citizens, don't we have rights that have to stand throughout the country that states shouldn't abridge with their own sets of laws?
Of course we do, and those rights are found in the Bill of Rights. So, for example, we have the right to free speech. We have the right to religious liberty. We have the right to keep and bear arms. All of those are rights that are in the Bill of Rights.
All right, so there's no right to same-sex marriage, but still, so a lot of things have to be interpreted. But a lot of things have to be interpreted. The Constitution doesn't lay out every specific right that we could ever think of.
But the Constitution leaves a great many issues to the states. And at the state level, different states can choose to adopt different policies. So, for example, let's take a different issue. Let's take medical marijuana and the legalization of marijuana. I think that is an issue for the states. Now, some states may decide to legalize it. Other states may decide not to. Now, I'll tell you, as a voter, if I were voting in Texas, I would vote against legalizing marijuana. But I think if other states make a different determination, they have a right to do that. Colorado's made that determination. Washington State's made that determination. And part of respecting the Constitution is understanding that the citizens of California may make a very, very different decision than the citizens of Texas or the citizens of Florida or New York. And we've got 50 states, and that's part of the tremendous diversity of the United States of America.
All right, before we go, Ted, I just have one more question for you. And, of course, all of this goes back to comments made by Lindsey Graham that if you were murdered in the Senate, maybe nobody would care. Well, here it is. I mean, there are some people that say that right now at this point, you are just a straw man. They're just hoping to use you to stop Trump and then upend the whole thing at the convention. I mean, you got Jeb Bush supporting you now and Carly Fiorina making an appearance with you today and even Lindsey Graham saying things about you more positive. Is it really about you or is it about just stopping Trump?
Well, there are only two people who have any path to winning a majority of the delegates at the convention, me or Donald Trump. Listen, are there some folks in Washington that have a fevered dream of parachuting in some white horse who wasn't on the ballot, some Washington deal maker to become the nominee? Yes, they have that fevered dream. It ain't never going to happen. It is an impossible dream. If they tried it, the voters would quite rightly revolt. What I have said many times, listen, I think it would be a disaster to nominate Donald Trump, but the only way to stop him is to do what we're doing. Beat him at the ballot box. Beat him with the voters. That's what we're doing over and over and over again. We've beaten him now in 10 states all across this country. And so, listen, I'm proud that we are uniting Republicans. If you look at the 17 Republicans who started this race, 5 of those candidates have now endorsed me. Rick Perry and Carly Fiorina, and Lindsey Graham, and Jeb Bush, and Scott Walker. Now, that represents the full range of the Republican Party, the ideology of the Republican Party. And you're right, Lindsey Graham, and I disagree on a lot of issues. In fact, I joked when he hosted an event for me. I said, you know what? This is the first time I've ever had an event hosted by someone who a few weeks earlier was publicly calling for my murder.
All right, well, Ted, I know you're going to be coming back to California. Can we get you to stop by again at some point?
Absolutely. I look forward to it. And let me encourage your listeners, come to our website, tedcruz.org, sign up online, volunteer, contribute. We're building a grassroots army here in California, and California is going to decide the outcome of this Republican primary.
All right, Senator Ted Cruz, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you, Senator.